Hey everybody, I want to start off this video series, these 5 sort of lessons about what it means to walk the Christian life, by talking first and foremost about God. So let's just go ahead and tackle the biggest subject, the most important issue, the perhaps most controversial issue of all, and that is our responsibility to a creator. And I know that there are folks out there who don't believe there even is a God, which is an extreme thing when you think about it, that we're some who live their lives seeking to obey God, and there are some who don't even believe he exists. And then when it comes to who God is, there are all different types of beliefs out there about the very nature of God. And there have been different religions, and there have been different belief systems and different denominations, even within the whole Christian world. So where do we go from there? And let me just say this: the fact that there are so many different beliefs about the very nature of God. Is there even one God, or are there many gods? What is the nature of? Is he spirit? Is he ethereal? Is he just conceptual? Or is there a real being, God, who is personal and in relationship? The fact that there are all these different views, and even the fact that there's a debate about whether there is a God, doesn't tell us that there is no God. In fact, quite the opposite. The fact that we are constantly talking about this and that human history is filled with a discussion about this, I think tells us the opposite. Tells us that there is, in fact, something there. There is, in fact, something to be debated. There is something behind all of this conversation. And I'll just, of course, lay my cards out on the table. I believe there is, not only is there a God, but that the Christian view of God is correct. I'm not saying we have all of the truth. I'm not saying we have, every dotted I and every, crossed T is perfect in how we see God. I'm simply saying I do believe that in its essence, our understanding as Christians about who God is, and particularly what he has done for us as revealed in the Bible, is true and is right. And that's made all the difference. How you live your life in so many ways is defined by this question: who is God? You could, of course, be a moral person and not have a view of God the way Christians have had a view of God. And you can be an immoral person, a hypocrite, someone who claims to be in relationship with God, the Christian God, and lives extremely immoral. And of course those are both true, because you can live inconsistently with any belief system. But the real question I have is this: what, at its heart, what does the Christian faith teach about God? And coming to grips with that is probably the most important question you will ever ask, you'll ever answer in your life. And of course there are people who don't ask that question and who really functionally live as if there is no God. So you've, in a sense, answered the question without even answering the question. You live as if there is no God. You have basically chosen to say that the answer is no, there is no God. Even if you haven't officially decided that there is no God. That's sort of the agnostic view. So I don't know anyone who is agnostic and says, I don't know whether there's a God, but I'm going to live as if there is one. That's a very unusual view, right? Usually it's, I don't know if there's a God, we don't have enough evidence, but I'm basically going to live my life as if there is no God. So let's just take all that into one category and say that's sort of the category of no, there is no God. But to say that there is one, and to take that seriously, and to seek to live relationally with this God, is the biggest question, biggest answer, biggest change you can face in your life. And I'm just going to speak personally for a minute here. It has made all the difference for me. I became a Christian when I was 14, 15 years of age, and began a process of seeking to know God, or him really revealing himself to me, and seeking to live in obedience to him, not because I'm trying to earn salvation, but because I love him, because he's redeemed me through Christ. He's made me his own. And that has made the difference. So the way you go about life, I mean, I think about my life and I think, so I'm 42. That's a strange age. That's a good age to be, I think. I'm not a kid anymore. I'm not an old man. I think I'm done with all of my formal education, right? So I don't think I'm going back to school anymore. I think I'm done with that. I'm not sort of green when it comes to my call to ministry. You know, I've done over 100 funerals, done weddings. I've been there at bedsides of people who are dying on a regular basis. I've pastorally counseled people through all different situations. I've dealt with a single mom dying of leukemia and how to help her two girls. And I've dealt with marital issues that led in divorce and that were wonderfully restored. And I've dealt with people who have all different types of parenting issues. So my point being is not that I'm the most experienced person or even as most experienced as I will end up being. But I think I'm at that balance in life now where I'm not sort of looking back at life yet fully. I'm not there. But I'm also not new to this whole thing. I'm at that. So if you, in one sense you could say the world is sort of run by people who are really about from 40 to 60, let's say, right? That's that window. After 60, perhaps, obviously you still have great influence, but you're kind of looking back at a previous generation. And before 40, maybe you're looking forward still. And what I would say for me here at 42 then, this is the biggest, most important issue of my life, is that there is a God and I'm responsible to him. And when you think about it, you're going to choose to live life a certain way. When you make your daily decisions, so if we talk about parenting, we talk about marriage, and we talk about work and jobs, and all that is going to be dependent on what are you doing it for, or whom are you doing it for. So if the answer to that question is I'm doing it all primarily for myself, I just want to get ahead. I just want to do whatever makes me the happiest, makes me the most joyful or content, or gives me the most pleasure, or whatever it is. That will definitely determine how you face everything else in life. How you deal with finances and money and possessions, how you deal with physical health and how important that is and where that plays its role in your life. But if you say, I'm ultimately doing this towards a higher responsibility, there is something or someone above me that I will answer to, and I am seeking to do what is pleasing to him. That changes everything. I believe, at this point, friends, from the core of my being, that I will answer to God for this life. For however many years I'm here, whatever I do with it, I will answer to God. Now, I have a Savior in Jesus. I believe that he covers my sin through his death and resurrection. So I'm Orthodox, biblical Christian believer. But even within the biblical Christian view, of course, we do face God for what we've done with the talents that he's entrusted to us. And so when I get up in the morning, I try to get up at 6 a.m. Sometimes I sleep in. But from the minute my head hits that pillow at night, the biggest question behind my life and how I spend my hours awake is, what does God think? How does he view my life? Is it pleasing to him? What does he want? Where is he leading? What is his will? What's his goal? What's he doing? The Psalm 139, talks about the days of our life being already written beforehand, that God ordains them before any one of them came to be, that this is his story, and I'm a real player, and I really exist. I don't believe that in fatalism or the idea that we're just sort of robots in this big picture. He created us to actually really exist. But there is a God in heaven who oversees everything, and I'm responsible to him. And I would just say this, my friends and whoever's listening, answer that question carefully. If you don't answer it, your answer is going to be no. Almost always, right? Nobody assumes and says, I don't know, but I'm going to assume there is a God. Almost everyone says, I don't know, and I'm going to assume there isn't, and live life for myself or someone else, something else. Consider carefully that question and why it matters. Look at the evidence. Certainly, we could go into the apologetic. I think those can be very helpful. The apologetic about why there is a God. But ultimately, really, people can look at the same evidence and come to the conclusion that I don't believe there's a God, and look at the same evidence and say it's undeniable that there is a God. So the real question for you is then, as you consider this, where do you land? Where's your belief? And I would just say, if there is a God, and I believe with all my heart and soul that there is, then we're responsible to Him, and our lives will be different in relationship to Him. Who's God? He is the all-powerful, almighty Creator. Now, there's a lot we don't understand about God. When you think about God, you think, well, how can there be a being who never had a beginning? And I get it. There are some questions about God I think we will rack our mind about, and we'll never come to a full understanding, because we're finite creatures. We're mammals with a spirit. We're not able. We're limited in what we can grasp. And one of those questions, of course, is how can there be a God, an all-powerful being who's always existed, who had no beginning, who has no end, who is limitless in all of His power and ability, and yet is perfectly good. So when we think of why we view the world through a lens of good and evil, why do we recognize something to be wrong, sinful, immoral, something that's evil, that's not good? It's because it flows from the nature of God. And that's how He made the world, and that's how He made us as human beings in His own image. So when I see something and I say, that's just wrong, let's say there's a child abuse issue on the news or whatever, and I say, that's wrong. Where does that come from? It comes from an understanding that there's a God who's put His image in me, who sees something as wrong, as not right, as not in line with His will. And so I see that through that same image as Him. Right and wrong comes from Him, a sort of a direct line from the very character of God, and as He's imprinted that in me as His image bearer. But that this God, who is all-powerful and made all things, and He is beautiful. Everything He made, our understanding of creation comes from Him. Our beauty in the created order comes from Him. When you see the mountains and you see the stars at night, the big sky over Wyoming or Montana, where my Jackson Hole, one of my favorite places here on this earth, is right there. Where does that beauty come from? When you go and look out at the beauty in the Grand Canyon, where does that sense of awe? It comes from the fact that God's a mighty and artistic creator. This God is beautiful, and He's good, and He loves us. So that's important. A lot of views of God would be that He's distant or that He's indifferent to us. I don't believe that's correct. I believe the Christian view has always taught, and rightly taught, in its best sense, that God actually cares about us. He cares about all of His creation and all of His creatures, but human beings do play a unique role within the created order. God loves us, and He cares about us enough that He seeks to redeem us through His Son Jesus and His death as an atonement for sin, and His resurrection to triumph over the grave, and that He wants to be in relationship with us. We can know Him. We can worship Him, which is to simply see Him correctly as He is and enjoy Him. We can pray to Him. So prayer is simply speaking with God, having the right formal words, having sort of these highfalutin sort of poetic words is not necessary. It's not necessarily bad. It's not necessary, though. It's to talk to God, and that God actually, really, truly hears us, and we can know Him. And I believe that God has spoken through revelation God reveals himself. So if there's a God, does he reveal himself? Right? That's the next question. If there's a God, how do we know him? We know him through his creation. He's made it, and again, you can see it in all of its beauty and grandeur and other aspects of God's character through creation, but that he gives a special revelation. He reveals himself through the Bible. And we can get into debate after debate about specific passages of the Bible, but let's just say this in the overall sense. The Bible has withstood the test of time, has crossed cultures and languages, and has been a source of immeasurable good. Even from that objective standpoint of how we recognize good and evil, a source of incredible good in the world. Now you can say, well, what about this passage and this narrative that tells the story? I understand the Bible can be a confusing book in the sense that things are recorded in the Bible and not necessarily commended. It's describing the history of Israel. It's describing the history of God's people. Not everything written there is saying, this is how you should act. So I think that causes a lot of problems and a lot of issues. And is it written by men? Yes, it's written by men and perhaps women, but it's written by human beings. Does that make it imperfect? Well, it makes it contextual. It means God's revealing himself in a specific time and place through a specific means. But you read it, you study it, and you kind of learn some of the background, and you begin to understand more clearly what is being said through that, and it does begin to speak to us that God, the Creator, actually makes himself known, actually reveals himself to us, and wants to be in relationship with us. So I know, and I don't want to get into all these other issues yet because we're going to get to them, but this life is not going to last forever, and one day the answer will be clear. Is there a God? And even more than that, if there is, what is his nature? And who is he? And how do we relate to him? And I would say, friends, that to throw out to you the old Pascal's wager, which has been criticized rightfully because it's limited, but it has its place. Here's what I would say. Would you want to die and find that there is a God and not have believed in him? Which is one thing, right? You could die and find out there is no God. If I die and find out there's no God, I'm not really finding out there is no God. There just is no God, right? We're nothing more than matter and physiology. But if you don't believe in God, and you find out there is no God, again, find out, it's irrelevant. But if you do believe there's a God, and you have chosen not to believe in him, there are consequences that last into eternity from that. Whereas for those who do believe in him, follow him, love him, and have a relationship with him, when we die and find that there is a God, that relationship will continue. How long? For as long as God is, which means forever. So the key question, before you can even get to these real questions, I think about marriage and parenting and our jobs and work and death itself, before you can even get to those questions, you got to ask and answer this question in your own mind and heart. Is there a God, and what is his nature? Is the Christian view of God correct and right? Again, not saying we have all the answers. Nobody has all the answers, and there's so much more for us to learn, and we'll be learning for all eternity, I believe, because otherwise we'd be all-knowing, and we are never all-knowing, even upon death, even if we enter into glory, right? Today, we're not all-knowing at that point. Only God is all-knowing, so there's always more to learn, but answer that key question. And again, for me, that has been everything. Every day is shaped by a belief that there is a God who knows me and I know, whom I'm responsible to and who loves me, and whom I'm seeking to please and whom one day I will meet. Okay, love you guys. Take care.